Okay, you should be good now.
Okay, let's try again. Good morning, everybody. It is now 8:02. I'm Fred Sussman, Chair of the City of Annapolis Financial Advisory Commission, and I'm going to call the Commission's regular September 14th, 2023 meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. As I mentioned, various people have let me know that they need to drop off sooner rather than later. So we'll try and we may need to shift the agenda around a little bit and try and move along as best we can. And hopefully we can get any business that we have to get taken care of with votes done while we still have a quorum. I sent out an agenda about a week ago, or maybe a little bit less. Have you all had an opportunity to review the agenda? If so, entertain a motion to approve the agenda. A motion made by Frank Brown.
Fred?
Yes.
Sorry, a question on approval of minutes. Do we have the 28th to approve as well?
Pardon?
You've got April 13, April 20, and then I think we also received April 28.
Yeah, well, I think what I said was that was not an official meeting
Oh, I
because it
understand.
was not
Okay.
properly posted.
Sorry, I apologize. All right, thank you.
And I believe we met on May 8th, but I don't have minutes for that. So Kim is going to check on that. So we'll have to take that up in our next meeting. But thanks for bringing that to my attention, Jim. I think Frank Brown made a motion to approve the agenda. Jim Cardillo seconded it. Any objection? Hearing none, the minutes, I'm sorry, the agenda of today's meeting is approved. First item is approval of minutes for April 13th and April 20th. I sent them out along with the agenda earlier this week. Sorry for being so delayed, but we have had very few meetings, since then. I also sent out, as noted, April 28th, I believe, but that was not an official meeting because it was not properly posted for the public. So we will not approve those minutes. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of April 13th and April 20th, 2023 regular meeting or meetings of the Financial Advisory Commission. So I have a motion made by Jim Cardillo.
Yep.
Second by, I'm looking at the screens, Terry Hepworth. Any discussion or objection? Hearing none, the minutes of April 13th and April 20th are approved. Because Ed Meehan is the first who has to drop off in a few minutes. I'm going to move the agenda down to unfinished business, the fact spending affordability subcommittee. And if you recall, Ed and Bob Burton were a subcommittee on that particular issue, and Bob was really spearheading it. Bob is no longer with us as of June 30th, having resigned to move because he moved to Delaware. So let me just turn to Ed Meehan for a brief report so that he can leave when he needs to. Ed?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Fred. And sorry, everybody, something came up last night that requires me to disappear, shortly. But yeah, I think the gist of it is, as everybody knows, Bob and I had put together a report some time ago outlining potential approaches and advantages of a spending affordability function here. It is correct. Bob really was the spearhead, and I was, supporting him in that regard. And I know that we have had a number of discussions, and we were contemplating, variations on the concepts that we had laid out in the initial report. My suggestion at this point, with Bob having, stepped off the commission for those personal reasons, is that it might be appropriate to set a time at a future meeting where we all can discuss where we should go with this. I know at one of our more recent meetings, we had left open some items for further exploration. So So I think where we are is it's time to regroup and put that back in front of everybody to talk through what we best should do next.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Any questions or comments? If not, thank you, and we'll keep that item on the agenda, and maybe you and I can talk offline before the next meeting.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, we could figure out, best way to kind of move the group forward on that idea.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it. And feel free to drop off whenever you need to.
Thank you.
The other item and the big item for today that needs a vote, so I want to take it out of order, and then we can come back to reports and things like that, is the new business, the budget ordinance O-24-23 amended. Just a little background here. Shortly after the ordinance was introduced, I received an email with a referral to the Financial Advisory Commission for comment, and that was a good while ago. And I was not aware that there were revisions to it made after introduction. That's why the one I sent to you, what was the agenda, was the original as introduced. Jody, thank you for bringing to our attention last night that there has been an updated version. I apologize for getting that to everybody so late. Actually, Jody getting it to everybody so late last night. Jody, as I understand it, this is typical of the type of bond ordinance the city adopts every year to provide the funding for capital projects that have been approved in the capital budget. That's number one. Number two, my recollection is that the Financial Advisory Commission endorsed the proposed capital budget and capital program as part of the budget process. And what this ordinance is doing is just providing funding, to fund those projects. And I think that's a big picture. Let me turn it over to you, Jody, for any kind of more details that you can provide. And also, if you can tell us, because I tried to figure it out very, very, very quickly this morning, the differences between what was originally introduced and what you sent to us last night. So if you could just briefly touch on that as well, it'd be greatly appreciated. So let me turn it over to you.
So
Thank you.
I'll tell you about the amendment process. When that was introduced, I had provided a complete version of what we wanted the ordinance to look like to the drafter in the Office of Law. And I said, add the line numbers, add the headers, etc. But what she had done instead is used a template from the bond ordinance from last fall, and then tried to just copy, cut and paste my words from my version into that version. And I did not have time to review it before it was posted. And it turned out that the template that she used was for last fall. And if you remember, last fall's bond ordinance had the P3 debt refinancing in it. It was a second bond ordinance that we considered. And the wording in it was very specialized for that purpose. And what it did was it left some paragraphs in there that were not applicable to what we need now. And this version, so what they did was they created an amendment that completely displaces what was originally put out there and replaces it. The only other option was to withdraw it completely and submit a new ordinance, which would have delayed the timeline of the bond ordinance. And the timing of the bond ordinance is critical because until it's passed, the Public Works cannot use the new bond monies that's budgeted on their projects until this thing is passed by council. So it delays some construction efforts.
All right, Jody, let me ask you this. Were there any material differences in the projects that were being funded
No,
and the amounts of money that were being authorized?
no. And if you compared them side to side, you'd see in most of the bond ordinance, it's a lot of legalese about the authority to issue debt. And there would be paragraphs in there talking about refinancing the subordinate debt that Medco had issued for the Hillman Garage project. There was a lot of the Hillman Garage stuff in there that was not needed. And I think that it inserted all my language, but left a lot of old paragraphs in there. So it would have just been in the body of the ordinance, and there's nothing substantial about what was changed on the projects. The exhibits are what I consider to be the meat of the bond ordinance. It tells you the list of projects that we're going to finance with bonds, and it goes right in line with the capital budget. That did not change at all. So, and the amount of debt that we're asking authority to issue is a little over 26 million. That's the maximum. That's a ceiling. We would never issue that much. We won't need to this year. In fact, I don't know if we'll have plans to sell long-term bonds this year. We may be able to hold off on that because of the available proceeds that we have. So that is the same. Those amounts are the same. So nothing of substance. Well, I don't call it substance, but I think my bond counsel would probably tell you that a lot of that legal language in there is, let
me ask you two
important.
questions.
Go ahead.
Number one, if members of the commission did not have an opportunity to review what you sent out last night in terms of the revised, but did review the original one, they still would have the information necessary to make an intelligent decision on the funding.
I believe so.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, has this bond ordinance been reviewed, endorsed, or anything by city's financial advisors?
The financial advisors do not review and approve the bond ordinance itself. It is actually created by my bond counsel, McKenna Shelton Hen. Will, I'm not gonna be able to remember Will's last name. I work with one of the attorneys there to draft this, and they come up with the language that's needed. And it does change periodically, but the standard bond ordinance is very much the same. And they just check and make sure all the legal language is in there for the bond sale.
Okay.
For any bond sale that we do, providing me the authority to sell bonds and outlining what the bonds would look like and what kind of a bond sale we would conduct.
Okay, good. Thank you for answering those questions. All right, I'm sorry to have interrupted you in your presentation. What else would you like to tell us about the proposed ordinance?
Like I said, the words throughout the ordinance are meant to support bond sales legally, from a legal perspective. And what I focus on is how much do I need to have the authority to borrow as a ceiling. And that includes all the active projects that we're constructing, the bonds. And if you take a look at Exhibit 1, and I'll quickly share this with you to walk you through what we're asking for is the authority for 26,616,000. Let me see. Okay. All right, and I assume you can see that there. Yes. Okay. So this is Exhibit 1, and this is a list of projects that are in our capital budget, and it lists project numbers, project name, the prior approved appropriations, the new appropriations for fiscal year 24, and total appropriations. So this is the total spending authority. And then these columns, you have the funding sources for the individual project. And what we end up here is how many of the appropriations are funded by bonds. In the case of what I'm looking at here, $545,000 of bonds are on this project. And then here is what we've already used, what bond proceeds we've already applied to the project, which in this case is 0. And then therefore, the max I would need for this project would be 545,000 of new bond proceeds. So when you get down to the bottom of this page 2 on this exhibit, you'll see that if you were to add up all those columns, you're going to get this $67 million of bond proceeds needed. However, at the time we did this schedule, we had a total of $40 million of unused bond proceeds from prior issues. And so therefore, the net I would need to sell if all projects went forward and finished construction in fiscal 24 would be this 26 million. So that is the maximum amount that we request for debt authority. And the reason this one is very large this year, with all the $40 million, it's a city dock right here. This is some of the new debt for city dock. So that's making that number very, very large. And we have that, and the water distribution system is always a significant number too. So those larger projects are causing not only this number, but we have $40 million of debt proceeds available from our December 2022 bond sale. And that included some money for city dock. So those numbers are higher, especially the 40 million is higher than it has been in the past couple of years. Most of that city dock money. And that means that I need the $26 million of maximum authority. Well, and I'll follow up by saying that we will never issue all of that. Projects don't move as quickly as they're timed, and we only issue the amount of bonds that we need as we project our cash flow for the projects. And, you know, the 40 million of proceeds we have may be enough to see us through this year. So I'm hoping we won't have to have a bond sale this year, but if we do, it would probably be more likely on the water and sewer projects. Does anybody have any questions?
Before we get there, Exhibit 2, that's the amount of existing debt that's being refunded.
Okay, did my screen just change to Exhibit 2?
Yes.
Okay. So this is, one thing the bond ordinance does is provide the authority to refund debt if you wanted to sell it at a lower interest rate. I don't anticipate doing that at all, but we always ask for that authority to the maximum amount that we may need to refund. So, you know, interest rates are going up, and we have been refinancing our bond issues pretty frequently over the last few years. And the oldest outstanding issue, I think right now, is 2012 or 13. So most of our debt is very recent and in the years when the interest rates were very low. And with the climbing interest rates, I'm thinking that the opportunities for refinancing any of these issues is not going to be there for a while.
Okay, thank you, Jody. Can you, so that I can see everybody, can you stop sharing screen?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thank you. All right, does anybody have any questions for Jody or comments about, you know, her remarks? No, you must have been very thorough and very understandable, Jody. Thank you.
No.
I do see. I spoke too fast. Jim Cardillo.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I was just scrolling over.
Can you try and speak up, Jim?
I apologize. How's that? Better?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. With regards to, I'm looking at Exhibit 1, and I'm looking at the 26.6 million appropriations financed by this ordinance. The unspent proceeds from geo bonds issued plus interest, that negative $40 million number,
Mhm.
where does that originate? I'm trying to trace that one back.
So that you wouldn't be able to tell from looking at what you see. That if I went to all of the bank accounts that we have deposited bond proceeds into and earned interest on, if I showed you the list of all those accounts at that date, it would have totaled $40 million.
Okay.
So those are idle bond proceeds sitting in accounts waiting to be spent.
Okay. So funds available, but not yet committed. Well, they've been
Yes, it's a pool. It's like a bond pool.
bond pool. Okay.
The city dock ones are particularly for city dock, but the rest of them are in a pool that can be used on a first come, first served basis.
So I thought I remember an issue maybe 3-4 years ago when we had an issue of unspent bond proceeds that were not being utilized for projects.
Yes, and I think before my time, which would have been about 5 years ago, when bonds were sold, they were sold for particular projects. And for the most part, they were selling the bonds for the current capital budget, which means you'd sell all the bonds you would need at the time you issued the capital budget. And of course, the projects don't move ahead. And what had happened was we had accumulated a lot of unspent proceeds from prior issues because those projects weren't moving forward. So what the first bond ordinance I did put all the bonds that were remaining in a pool that could be applied to the first spending projects and not an individual project. Because when you sell it, if you say it's for this project, you have to use it for that project unless you do some other kind of legal document that will allow you to switch it to another project.
Right. And that's why these are classified as geo. Okay.
Geo, and we put these all in a big pool. The 26 million would be all one batch of funds, and we would apply it to the projects that are spending first.
Thank you.
That answer your question, Jim?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, good, thank you. Other hands raised, questions, comments? If, and I don't see any, it's my sense that because the FAC endorsed the capital budget and capital program during the budget process, and because this ordinance is providing funding to support the capital budget as approved and as endorsed by the FAC, I personally don't see any reason why the FAC should not support the adoption of this bond ordinance. But my opinion stands to be changed if I hear from somebody else. If not, I'll entertain a motion to the FAC recommend to the mayor and city council approval of ordinance O-24-23 amended.
So moved.
Motion by Jim Cardillo, second by Frank Brown. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, raise your right hand.
Aye.
Unanimous. So thank you very, very much, everybody. We got through that pretty quickly. And I think that concludes the actual business items that we have for today. So now we can go into other issues. And as people need to drop off, feel free. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for October 12th at 8 a.m. So that having been said, let me turn it over to Mike Malinoff. Mike, you said you needed to drop off, so I think you're the next one. And let's hear your presentation.
Thank you, Fred and committee. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview because we're pretty close to starting the National Citizen Survey. Vicky's here and she can go into the details. But as you all know, this is something the FAC and the audit committee have been asking about for a couple of years. The polling is something I'm very familiar with. In the city of Annapolis, I've done 3 different polls over my history. one from the community college, one from a local pollster, and one from the what's now called Polco, or National Citizen Survey. And by far, the National Citizen Survey is the better. It's one that ICMA, my organization, International City County Management Association, works closely with. And there are many benefits to it, not the least of which is that they also benchmark the community results with 500 other communities. So you get to see how you're doing, and you also get to compare. There are other new elements to the polling that Polco is now adding to the service. And I'll, at this point, turn it over to Vicky. I think the timing, we're closing out questions this week, I think, and then hope to get this done in time for the upcoming fiscal year 25 budget. So Vicky.
Yeah, so Polco is the organization that runs that survey, but the survey itself as an instrument has a very long history. I think has been offered for more than 30 years. As Mike said, there are organizations across the country that do this survey, and so part of what you get for participating is taking a look at how you compare. It also gives us a chance to ask some custom questions. So that's the process we're in right now, is gathering those ideas for what kinds of custom questions we might want to ask. In addition, the piece that Polco has really added to that is follow-up surveying, a platform for follow-up surveying, so that if there are particular elements either that stand out in your results in the National Community Survey, or things that might not really necessarily fit into that survey instrument, but that you're still interested in gathering information about, gives you a platform for continuing to do citizen engagement over a longer period of time. So the city has gone ahead and signed an agreement with Polco, and we've had the first couple of meetings, and as Mike said, we're looking at the timeline for that. We're hoping to have done in time to both inform some strategic planning efforts as well as the FY25 budgeting process. So we're quite looking forward to that. City of Annapolis actually did do the National Community Survey in 2012, so a fairly long time ago. But it'll be really nice to have a new baseline for the city to measure itself against. And if you are interested, I can share with you what just the baseline questions are. We don't get to change the baseline questions, but we do potentially get to add to those, right, with some custom questions. But I can share the baseline questions just so you see what those are ahead of time. The survey itself is done in two pieces. There's actually a scientific sample that's done first, that deliberately then samples people across the city. They'll actually use, the city maps and ward boundaries, information from the census, stuff like that, to collect a scientific sample. And then there's an open sample period where anyone in the city can respond. Part of that, of course, for us will be making sure that people respond, encouraging people to respond. And so we'll be looking to all of our various partners like yourselves when that time comes, so that we make sure we get a really as robust a response as we can get.
Thank you, Vicky. Appreciate it. Anybody have any comments or questions for Vicky on the survey, or for Mike? No, thank you very much, both of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
To moving it along.
And Fred, I'm going to have to hop off now. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Before I forget, Kim, can you prepare a communication to the mayor and council reflecting the commission's actions on the bond ordinance, please?
Affirmative.
Thank you. Okay, moving right along. Jody, any report from the finance department other than the bond ordinance?
No, no, I typically just kind of run through some of the bigger things we're working on. We're closing our Munis system for FY '23. It's a very arduous process and a step-by-step process of cleaning anything out of the system that's been stuck in any of the queues and processing things as much as we can to get everything recorded in '23. It's called a hard close. Kudos to my staff. I was there till 9 o'clock last night, just kind of working and hanging around in case they had questions. But I think they knocked off at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning last night. So they were there quite late, and I think they got it finished up. And so we're working on that. Then comes the drafting of the financial statements for '23. I'm starting the process of writing policies. I started with my travel policy, and that's almost done in draft form, and I'll be distributing that to some of the users to get their input on it before we finalize it. The Tricia Hopkins, the HR manager, and I are meeting with an attorney that specializes in employee benefits and our actuary later this month to talk about ideas for new pension options, which is something the FAC has been asking about, trying to move towards a defined contribution option for new employees or for existing employees. We don't really know what we're looking at yet, but that's the first step in determining what we need to do, what options might be out there, and what the process is going to be. And then the last thing that the FAC may be interested in is we're starting the initial process of the union discussions, starting our initial review of the agreements, and trying to work out some schedules, starting to work out some schedules with the union reps. So that's what we've got started that you might find interesting, and I'll take any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Jody. Anybody have any questions or comments for Jody on her report? No, thank you. Vicky, anything else from the city manager's office and compound?
Not right now. Obviously there's always a lot going on, but and a couple of things that Jody and I have been talking about, especially around grants. But that's still sort of in some sense in the early stages. So not yet.
Okay, great. Just for my own curiosity, when does the new planning and zoning director officially start?
He actually started Monday.
Monday, okay.
Yep. Chris's first official day on the job was Monday.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yep, Chris Jakubiak.
Next, audit committee. Anything from the audit committee, Jim?
Last meeting of the audit committee was July 17, chaired by Alderman Arnett. Covered a couple of topics with regards to Alderman Arnett responded to some recent articles that were in the news with regards to city operations, which I don't know if it was within the purview of the audit committee or not, but we are still seeking 2 members of the audit committee. We have 5 members now, still seeking 2 additional.
Okay, and as I think mentioned before, if we can find a replacement from this group for Jim, I think he would like to step down from that. So if any members of the commission would like to also be a member of the audit committee as a representative of the commission, just let me know offline. And we'll see what we can do to help you, Jim.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'll continue to serve as the FAC designee.
Pardon?
I will continue to serve as the FAC designee.
All right, thank you. And if anybody thinks they might be interested, want to know what more is involved, why don't you talk to Jim offline as well? So either Jim or me. That concludes all the agenda items. Does anybody else have anything, for the good of the order? If not, the next meeting, as I indicated, will be October 12th at 8 a.m. unless circumstances change and either we need to reschedule or we need a special meeting sooner. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made by, nobody wants to, Perry, seconded by Frank Brown. And all in favor signify by saying, raising your right hand. Opposed? No.
Aye.
All right, very good. Thanks for